Now you! Get out of here! I'm the one living in the $1 million mansion. When I returned home from my overseas job, my husband, Matthew, suddenly announced he wanted a divorce. The reason was that my sister, Rachel, was pregnant with his child. I was at a loss for words. Matthew's mother, Samantha, and Rachel, who both looked pleased with themselves, watched me with smug expressions. Feeling a surge of anger at their nasty faces, I quickly regained my composure and made a decision. All right. No problem. Without further ado, I casually responded to their comments and left the home I had lived in for many years. I was determined to make them regret ever picking a fight with me. With that thought in mind, I headed to a specific place. My name is Jennifer. I used to work for a company as a fashion designer. However, when my rival and colleague, Mary, left the company, I decided to go independent as well. Now, I work as a freelance designer, mostly focusing on international projects. Even with my busy schedule, I had a husband. His name was Matthew. Matthew and I started dating at work. I was a designer, and he was my boss, the head of the development department. There were frequent clashes between the development and sales departments at our company. The main cause of these clashes was me. I was unwilling to compromise on work matters, and even when the sales department asked me to lower costs, I refused to back down. Even during my time at the company, my name carried significant weight. Instead of opting for mass production with cheaper materials, I insisted on high-quality materials to add value to my designs. The sales department constantly opposed this approach. They repeatedly told me that it would never sell, leading to many clashes, which must have given Matthew many headaches. However, Matthew always respected my resolve. There are many clients who love your designs. Jennifer, just create as you envision. I'll handle the negotiations with sales. I was drawn to his mature confidence and eventually confessed my feelings to him. Our relationship began and eventually led to marriage. I thought life would continue smoothly without any major issues. But reality was not that kind. What? You can't have children? Married for 5 years. At this time, I was still active in the United States, but I had already resigned from the company. I was working on a new collection for the overseas market. It was then that I discovered my infertility. What kind of worth does a woman who can't have children have? This hotel has been cherished since my grandfather's time, and now you're going to ruin it because of you? Don't be ridiculous. My MIL Samantha yelled. From the beginning of our marriage, Matthew had been persistently asking for children, but there was no sign of me getting pregnant. Matthew, worried, insisted on a fertility test. Understanding the importance of this for our future, I agreed to the test. The results revealed that the issue was on my side. When my MIL learned of the test results, she was furious. Matthew's family owned a renowned, long-established hotel. Determined not to let it fail under her watch, Samantha had made Matthew leave his company job to take over as the heir. She also demanded that if Matthew had a child, that child should inherit the hotel. But Matthew wasn't having any children. Desperate for grandchildren, Samantha scolded me excessively. A woman who can't have children is useless. We didn't intend to make such a person our DIL. Naturally short-tempered, I was angered by her words and fiercely retaliated. Ignoring the fact that she was my husband's mother, I responded logically and argued back. I am the one bringing in the income, and I am the one handling the household chores. You say a woman who can't have children has no value, but I believe I'm contributing more profits than him. How is that useless? Normally, I wouldn't do anything to lower his standing. However, at that moment, I was also upset with his attitude. When we were working together at the company, he always fought alongside me no matter what happened, but when it came to her mother, he never stood by my side. Instead, he sided with her to appease her and never considered my feelings.
Even if you're making a living, if you're not functioning as a woman, it doesn't mean anything.
Isn't it outdated to think that a woman must have children in this day and age? If you're looking for an heir, why not adopt or find someone else? Matthew and I decided that even if we couldn't have children, we would still make it work. Samantha, frustrated by my refusal to back down, was visibly irritated. Her temples throbbed, and her breathing was heavy with anger. She looked like she might charge if shown a red cape. But I wasn't going to back down. She was the one who started this fight. I wasn't going to feel good being insulted and give up just like that. If I were to bend my will over such matters, I wouldn't have been able to handle being a designer. As I stood my ground and argued with her, Matthew continued to act as if he had nothing to do with it. He sat behind her, avoiding eye contact with me. That's only because you're so harsh. Matthew couldn't speak his mind.
That's not true. When we talked yesterday, he acknowledged it, didn't you?
When I turned to Matthew, he avoided my gaze, hiding behind his mother and muttering quietly. Sure, I felt that way when we first found out about the infertility, but after taking over the hotel, I've been kind of reconsidering.
What?
I was stunned by his evasive, unbelievable response. He had never mentioned such a thing until now. This wasn't the first time I'd argued with Samantha. Since he took over the hotel, we'd had several disputes. Even then, he'd never said anything like that. In fact, he used to stand up to Samantha at first. So why now? The moment I heard those incomprehensible words, my feelings for him disappeared. I became anxious about our future together, and our relationship turned awkward.
That's unacceptable. This is too much. How can he say that now? What is he thinking?
When I told my ex-coworker, Mary, about it, she was even angrier than I was. She looked furious, as if she couldn't believe it. Exactly. And since then, it's been awkward between us. He comes home when I'm asleep or not around. After we both quit, Mary and I often met at a cafe like this. We shared updates, discussed work, and felt like sisters, which was comforting.
He's done. You should just divorce him. You have no reason to cling to someone like that, do you? I know, but...
Mary's words were right. However, having someone who understood my work meant a lot to me. By this time, I was mainly working abroad. I frequently went on business trips and was often away from home for over a month. Being a woman and not staying at home, instead constantly being away for work, is a difficult lifestyle for a man to understand. His understanding and support meant a lot to me. She was also supporting me. She had deep connections with overseas clients. The increase in my overseas work was thanks to her cooperation.
Do you feel guilty because he's taking care of the house? But you bought that house with that understanding, right? You even had a custom-made house built considering your MIL and them. They treat you so badly after all you've done for them. Think it over. You don't need such horrible people.
Just as she said, I bought the house for them. Since I couldn't be home much, I wanted to at least make their lives easier. With that in mind, I built a custom barrier-free house to ensure a comfortable old age. The total cost amounted to $1 million. Mary understood my feelings. That's why she was so furious about their unbelievable behavior.
You're absolutely right. After what happened the other day, I feel it deeply. I'll talk to him soon. That's for the best.
We finished our venting session and were chatting idly while drinking coffee. When I got a call from Matthew. It's unusual for him to call when I'm with friends. Worried, I answered the phone, and he started speaking hesitantly.
Jennifer, I want a divorce. What?
All I could do was voice my shock at his sudden request. But he insisted on wanting a divorce. Realizing this couldn't be resolved over the phone, I told him I'd be home soon and hurried back. Upon entering the house, I was taken aback. My sister Rachel were standing next to Matthew.
Long time no see, Jennifer.
Rachel looked at me with a mocking expression. Samantha's face was unusually cheerful, adding to the bizarre scene and filling me with disgust. Confused, I stood there in a daze until Samantha spoke with a spiteful tone.
What are you standing there for?
Sit down.
Matthew has something important to tell you.
Her casual remark irritated me. But I managed to hide my feelings and sat down across from the three of them. Then, he delivered a bombshell.
Jennifer, let's break up. Rachel is pregnant with my baby. What? Rachel, you're pregnant?
I couldn't comprehend what I was hearing. Rachel didn't have a husband or even a boyfriend. So how could she be pregnant? And why would her pregnancy lead to our divorce? I tried to process this confusing situation and turned my gaze to Rachel. She looked triumphant as she dropped another bombshell.
Yes, I'm pregnant with Matthew's child. What?
Matthew's child. As I struggled to understand her words, Rachel placed an ultrasound photo on the table. Sure enough, it showed a baby, confirming that Rachel and Matthew's story was true. But a baby between them. How could this be? Could it be that they've been?
Were you having an affair with Rachel?
The unbelievable thought crossed my mind, and I voiced it with a shaky voice. Suddenly, Samantha stood up.
Rachel. Well done. Now you get lost, Jennifer. Our hotel is safe now that we have an heir.
That's great. I'll live in the $1 million mansion.
Things haven't been going well between you and Matthew, so there's no problem with a divorce, right? Oh, and make sure the distribution of property is fair. We're expecting a baby, so we'll take that as a celebration gift.
I couldn't hide my shock at their brazen statements. Matthew couldn't even look me in the eye, continuing to avert his gaze.
So, you were just using me for money from the start.
Mary's words echoed in my mind. She was right, I should have left this man long ago. I regretted my naivety deeply. Rachel, frustrated with my silence, pushed me aggressively.
Hey, are you listening? Matthew wants a divorce. Got it?
All right. No problem. Rachel continued angrily. But it was I who wanted to lash out. Yet, wasting energy on these scumbags was pointless. I stood up from the sofa and left the house with a dismissive response. Rachel and Samantha were shouting something, but I didn't bother to listen. I immediately set out to take action, leaving the house I had lived in for so long. There was no way I would let this go unpunished. An eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, as the saying goes. I would make them regret picking a fight with me. I headed to the top floor of a certain building. There, I met someone and revealed everything that had happened. Together, we set a plan in motion to take revenge on Matthew and his family. 1 month later, I agreed to the divorce as Matthew had requested. The house, with $90,000 remaining on the mortgage, was transferred to Matthew as he wished. The only matter left was the distribution of property. However, an unexpected situation arose for Matthew and his family. Somehow, they managed to find out my new address and showed up at my home, shouting,
"You've got to be kidding! Why is there still a mortgage on the house? The property tax bill is insanely high. We can't afford that kind of money." This is fraud. You haven't even settled the distribution of property. What's going on? Answer me.
What a sight. Barging into someone's home and shouting, how childish could they be? I couldn't afford to have the neighbors complain. So reluctantly, I let them in. I led them to the living room and immediately made a phone call to a certain someone. After finishing the call, I returned to find them rummaging through my house. They looked like thieves. Stunned by the sight, Samantha noticed me and shrieked.
Where's the money? You must have hidden some of the property settlement money. Show us all your assets now.
I had never seen anyone so brazenly searching for valuables. I was grateful to be rid of them.
You're wasting your time. There's nothing of value here. Here? Does that mean you have another house? Of course. Do you think I'd keep a house in a country with people like you? This is just my base in the US while I'm here. My main residence is in Paris, France.
The revelation shocked the three of them. Matthew and the others searching for me desperately was something I had anticipated. I knew they didn't have the financial means to maintain that house. I had also foreseen that they would storm into my house like this, and above all, Samantha, Matthew, and Rachel all lacked basic common sense. It's obvious that things like property taxes would be incurred. Even an idiot would know that. Yet none of those three questioned it. It's proof that they've always relied on others. There's nothing scarier than ignorance, and this is the perfect example. Especially Samantha. Even though she was supposed to be managing the hotel with her FIL Kevin, how could she not imagine such things? Her ignorance is unbelievable. But when I think about it, it's not surprising. She leaves all the management and accounting of the hotel to Kevin. I've never heard that she was involved in the hotel's accounting. Still, it's astonishing how ignorant she is. The management of a long-established hotel is laughable. As I gazed at the three of them, Rachel screamed at me in a shrill voice.
Why are you the only one living in luxury? We're about to be kicked out of our house. Don't you have any compassion to help us?
Are you delusional?
Why should I help people like you, who are at the bottom of the society? The maintenance costs and taxes are a result of your own lack of knowledge. It's your responsibility. It has nothing to do with me.
Rachel bit her lip in frustration at my cold response as I turned away.
If you have so much money, give us the distribution of property money right now. I've put that on hold because there's something I need to deal with first. Something you need to deal with?
The three of them looked puzzled, not knowing what I was talking about. At that moment, the doorbell rang as if on cue. Samantha glared at the door as if to say, who could it be at a time like this, but I nonchalantly headed to the visitor. I warmly welcomed the visitor and brought them inside. When I brought the visitor in front of the three, their faces turned pale. Among them, Samantha's face changed the most. She trembled and her body shook at the sight of the visitor.
Why are you here?
Samantha barely managed to get the words out with trembling lips. The person she was addressing gave her a cold look. It was Samantha's father, Stephen. In other words, Matthew's grandfather and my grandfather-in-law.
You two are truly disgraceful. Why is my father here? What? Are you connected with this woman?
Samantha's voice was filled with surprise and confusion. Stephen directed a stern gaze at her.
This woman? Who do you think you are talking to?
Stephen is an old-fashioned, strict man. He's very stubborn, and Samantha has always found him difficult to deal with. Since our marriage, he's always been very kind to me, welcoming me with a smile whenever I visited. But now, I finally understand why Samantha and Matthew are so terrified of him. Stephen was only gentle with me. He was always this harsh with Samantha and the others. No wonder they're scared. Stephen's presence was imposing enough to intimidate even Rachel, who was meeting him for the first time. Her face was pale with fear.
I reconnected with Jennifer in Paris. She told me about the divorce. I can't believe my own grandchildren and daughter did such awful things to her. As a parent, it's beyond disgraceful. I'm at a loss for words.
After Stephen handed over the hotel to Kevin, he started a new venture. He teamed up with the chef he'd been working with and began managing a new restaurant. This restaurant became a huge hit in America, attracting many international guests. This success led to an overseas expansion. And that's how I met him again in Paris.
Jennifer and I often met in Paris. There weren't many American friends there, so we kept in touch whenever we were in the city.
The introduction to Stephen's exclusive, members-only restaurant was thanks to Mary. She was such a regular at Stephen's place that she could get in without any credentials. They were close enough to dine together privately, and she advised me to consult Stephen about my situation. Thanks to her, I was able to act before Samantha and the others. If Stephen spoke to Kevin, he wouldn't find my story suspicious. Rather, Stephen was great in Kevin's eyes. Hearing Stephen's account would make Kevin side with me. So, before Samantha and the others could act, I made my move. I successfully got Stephen and his associates on my side.
Matthew's grandma also likes our brand, so she's a special customer as well. Why didn't you tell me that?
Matthew was furious, feeling he'd been kept in the dark. His outburst annoyed me, and I met his gaze with a cold stare, responding firmly.
And what difference would it make? What difference? As a couple, it's common sense to discuss important matters.
Common sense? Don't make me laugh.
If you're going to preach about common sense, you shouldn't be cheating and making babies with someone else. Why should I share my affairs with a man like you?
Matthew was speechless, hit by the truth of my words. At that moment, another visitor, who had arrived with Stephen, stepped forward. It was my attorney. I had asked him to come along with Stephen to handle this situation.
Since the topic of Rachel has come up, let me address my matter now. About the distribution of property with Jennifer, I'd like to deal with this first. What is this?
Matthew exclaimed as the lawyer, with a friendly smile, handed him a document. Matthew's face twisted in shock as he read the contents. It was a demand for compensation for his infidelity.
Did you really think you'd get away with cheating without any consequences?
Of course not.
I'm going to get what I'm owed, I said firmly. But I can't pay this amount. I can't even manage the $90,000 left on the mortgage. That's not my problem. You and your family wanted that house. I just transferred it as you requested. I don't see why I should be yelled at for it. It's not. I'm not yelling.
Matthew stammered, silenced by my logical retort. Rachel looked at him with contempt. Clearly realizing that Matthew had targeted me for the hotel, his inheritance. However, even that wouldn't be hers. Samantha intended it for her grandchildren, meaning Rachel couldn't use it. Realizing this, Rachel had insisted on the house. To have some financial security. If you have complaints, take them up with her.
I didn't force you to accept the house,
I said, maintaining my calm demeanor. Matthew seemed to understand my point, turning to glare at Rachel, who looked unsettled.
Why are you blaming me? You agreed that we should have the house. Rachel protested. If you hadn't insisted, I would have considered moving back to my parents. It's your fault. Don't you all understand yet that your ignorance brought this upon yourselves?
Stephen's anger boiled over, silencing their bickering. Samantha, Matthew, and Rachel flinched at his wrath.
Did none of you consider that a $1 million mansion comes with high property taxes and maintenance costs? And then you dare to question why Jennifer hasn't finished paying off the mortgage when she's been covering it all this time? Ridiculous.
The three of them fell silent, unable to meet Stephen's furious gaze. He sighed deeply, his disappointment palpable. Jennifer, I'm deeply sorry. My failures have caused you so much trouble. This isn't your fault, Stephen. Please don't apologize, I replied. Make sure you get the full compensation from them. I won't be helping them with this, Stephen declared.
Dad, please don't abandon us. Samantha pleaded desperately.
It all made sense now. Samantha had relied on Stephen as her last resort, confident that he would provide financial support if the divorce or property division got messy. She had counted on his help. But I had anticipated their moves and secured Stephen's support first. I felt a wave of relief knowing my plans had worked.
Thank you, Stephen,
I said. My pleasure. I will ensure that this claim is properly handled. If they fail to comply, legal action will be taken, and the matter will proceed to court, my lawyer stated confidently. His competence was truly admirable, and I could see that he enjoyed the challenge this case presented, as it promised substantial compensation for his services. Samantha's face contorted in despair at his smile, while Rachel shouted,
Do something! This is not what we agreed on. You promised that once Jennifer was out of the way, we'd have no financial troubles. You said you'd take care of everything. Shut up! I thought I could, but...
Samantha retorted. So, that's how it was. Rachel's comment finally made everything clear. Even Rachel must have known the consequences of getting involved with my husband. Yet she did it anyway. The reason lay in a secret she was keeping from Matthew and Samantha.
You kept your debt a secret from Matthew and Samantha, didn't you?
I said.
What?
Debt. Samantha and Matthew echoed, shocked. I showed them a photograph I had received from my mother.
This was included in a letter from my mother. After I informed her about my divorce from Matthew, she sent this to me via airmail. No, stop it!
Rachel must have thought I didn't know about her debt. She hastily tried to cover my mouth, but it was too late. I showed the letter I had received from my mother.
Rachel had incurred a $50,000 debt before she found out she was pregnant and had asked my mother to cover it for her. $50,000? What the hell is this?
Matthew shouted. The letter from my mother included pictures of numerous demand notices, with tear stains on the paper, a testament to her distress. My mother, a single mom who had raised me and my siblings, didn't deserve this additional burden. I was filled with gratitude for her, and the thought of Rachel imposing further hardship on her was infuriating. You meddling brat, Rachel muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. Though I knew Rachel had a foul mouth, Samantha and Matthew were taken aback by her change in demeanor.
Judging by your reaction, it seems the debt story is true.
Contrary to the shocked Samantha and Matthew, Stephen looked at Rachel calmly, just like me. He assessed her actions, understood that my testimony was true, and spoke to her with contempt. His words snapped Samantha and Matthew back to reality, and they began to berate Rachel.
How could you keep such a significant debt a secret?
Samantha demanded.
Shut up! If I had told you about the debt, you wouldn't have had kids with me.
Rachel shouted.
Of course not. Why would I take on the risk of infidelity and add the danger of a financial tightrope walk? It's absurd.
Matthew shot back. Everyone began shifting the blame onto each other. Watching their pathetic squabbling, I sighed in disgust.
Jennifer, I was wrong. I never realized Rachel was such trash,
Matthew said, noticing my reaction. He seemed to understand that rather than engaging in a pointless argument, he needed to show me sincerity and seek forgiveness. Changing his approach, he moved closer to me, pleading with his eyes.
Trash? You've badmouthed her plenty when she wasn't around,
Rachel retorted.
Shut up. You stay out of this.
Matthew made an outrageous statement to Rachel, who had exposed facts he didn't want to be revealed. At this point, I considered him contemptible. I looked at Matthew with cold eyes.
I'll never do this again. I don't even want children anymore. I'll support you with everything I have. Please, let's just pretend this never happened.
Matthew pleaded desperately. Are you an idiot? I replied.
What?
Matthew spoke on the assumption that I would forgive him. However, there was no way I would accept such a convenient scenario. I folded my arms, looked down on Matthew, and spoke harshly.
No matter how much you apologize, I will never forgive you. Honestly, I'm glad we're getting divorced. You've been nothing but a burden, and I feel relieved now that you're gone. Jennifer?
I had never spoken to Matthew this harshly before. Usually, I tried to keep my composure and handle things maturely. But considering he had tracked down my house and barged in, he didn't deserve any courtesy. I treated him with the cold indifference one would reserve for an intruder.
I'll be getting my due compensation from you. So look forward to that. No! Wait!
Stephen. I signaled, turning to Stephen.
Right?
He nodded. After saying what I needed to, I signaled Stephen. Stephen's attendants, who had been waiting outside, entered and escorted Matthew and the others out. They continued to plead for forgiveness, but their words fell on deaf ears. I had successfully cut ties with all three of them, and ensured they would face the consequences. Upon investigation, we discovered that Rachel and Matthew had been having an affair for the past 3 years. Rachel had even documented their relationship on a hidden blog, which served as irrefutable evidence of their infidelity. As a result, I demanded $100,000 in damages, not only for the destruction of my marriage, but also for the home invasion. When they resisted, I informed them that I would pursue legal action for attempted theft if they didn't comply. Faced with the overwhelming evidence, they decided to take the matter to court. However, I had all the evidence recorded on camera, ensuring victory in court. Additionally, the previous conversations were all recorded on a voice recorder. Matthew's voice admitting to the affair was also captured, making it clear to Samantha and the others that they were bound to lose. They resigned themselves to their fate. Afterward, I exposed this story to an acquaintance of mine who is a journalist. His hotel was a place frequented by celebrities, so they decided it was worth making an article about it and covered it extensively in a weekly magazine. Thanks to this, the hotel's reputation plummeted, and he was fired. Samantha was also fired, and Kevin was furious with her. He announced that he wanted a divorce and to sever ties with his son and wife due to their disgraceful behavior. Subsequently, their names became widely known to the public, and they received an unprecedented amount of backlash. Rachel also had her name publicized, leading to the termination of all her contracts. She had been working as a parts model, but no job offers came her way anymore, and she was currently in a huge fight with him. He had begun to refuse to acknowledge the child, and Rachel, in turn, approached Samantha, but naturally, Samantha sided with Matthew. Rachel was abandoned by both of them and reportedly gave up her child for adoption. My mother and I cut all ties with her. She now lives in an old apartment. leading a life of poverty that seems like a far cry from her previously luxurious lifestyle. Hearing from Stephen that they were mired in such misery brought a smile to my face. The retribution exceeded my expectations, and I felt somewhat relieved. In stark contrast to the turmoil they faced, my personal and professional life flourished. Since I was worried about leaving my mother alone in the US, I brought her to Paris to support me. Additionally, thanks to Stephen, our team has been thriving in Paris and has gained widespread recognition internationally. Mary has been very supportive of this endeavor, and she is now working with me again. She transitioned from designing to handling sales, while I focus on design and creation. Together, we began to move forward.
I'm truly glad to see a smile back on your face, said Stephen. It's all thanks to you and Mary. I'm really grateful,
I replied. Don't let negative experiences remain negative. Instead, turn those adversities into energy and overcome them. There is no time to wallow in self-pity. I have no choice but to keep looking ahead and working hard. With that resolve, Mary and I continued to dedicate ourselves to our work. I'm taking the air, the young master. Here's your settlement, $10,000. As she threw the wad of cash at me, my best friend Amanda burst out laughing. Clutching her stomach, she seemed genuinely amused from the bottom of her heart. James is crazy about me. He said you're just a plain, uninteresting woman. I see. I gave a small nod. I had a feeling that was the case. My marriage to my husband James was not a love match. It was simply because James' father William, the chairman of a major corporation, took a liking to me and made me James' wife. Given James' personality, a woman like me must bore him to death. In contrast, Amanda has a glamorous appearance and is fun to talk to. I can understand why James likes her. Hey, don't you want the money? Amanda grinned, as if dangling bait in front of a stray dog. But she wasn't the only one who started laughing. The lawyer who had been silent beside me also burst into loud laughter, pointing at Amanda. My name is Dorothy. I was originally a doctor working at a hospital, but the chairman recognized my work ethic and I became his son's wife. That was 2 years ago. My husband James takes advantage of being the son of a major corporation and spends his time playing around. On paper, he has the same title of doctor as me, but I've never seen him actually treating patients. What's wrong? Sighing like that. It's nothing. One time, I was on the phone with my best friend Amanda while doing household chores. As I made stew in a pot, I said, "The chairman, my father-in-law William, is coming over tonight. But James is so caught up in his playtime that he shows no sign of coming home on time. That's definitely not good." On the other end of the line, Amanda's voice turned grim. "I'd go look for him, but I'm not done cooking yet."
Wait a second.
Amanda sounded surprised.
Doesn't the housekeeper do the cooking?
That's how it appears to the world, but the reality is different. I replied with a sigh. James had hired a housekeeper when he was single, and he left everything, not just cooking, to the housekeeper to take care of his personal affairs. But after marrying me, James fired that housekeeper and so, he pushed all the household chores onto me, his wife. "You'd be bored staying home all the time, right?" he would say with a sneer. I was perplexed. Because I had intended to continue working as a doctor after getting married. But in reality, I'm so swamped with housework that I can't leave the house. Living in a high-rise apartment may look like a dream from the outside. But the truth is, it's like being a caged bird. I thought you'd be living a better life. But you haven't told James' dad about this? How could I possibly tell him? Even if he's such a philanderer to William, James is his only son. William doesn't know the reality of our married life. So even now, thinking it's for James' livelihood, he sends money to hire a housekeeper. But all that money vanishes into funds for James to play around with.
Getting married to someone favored by the parents sure has its hardships too.
Amanda murmured, sounding conflicted.
You never know what kind of man you'll end up with until you're actually married. And Dorothy ended up with a real dud in terms of character.
Her voice was mixed with pity and exasperation. Since my student days, I had been indifferent to romance. Knowing this, Amanda was likely thinking to herself, Dorothy had no eye for men. In fact, Amanda started saying things like this.
I wouldn't make that kind of mistake though. Mistake? You gotta do your research before dating someone. Men put on an act, so you can't be fooled by their nice demeanor.
Her tone was slightly condescending. We've known each other since our student days, but Amanda has this side to her. According to her, since she was born 2 months earlier, she's the senior one. But at the same time, her advice is often off the mark, including this time.
William kept pushing ahead with the wedding preparations, so I wasn't in a position to say I wanted to break it off. You thought about breaking it off?
Amanda asked, sounding surprised. That's right. I had no intention of marrying James. Having stated that fact aloud myself, I was made aware of it anew.
Why didn't you break it off then?
Amanda, who likes to pry despite not grasping the essence of things. The stew was ready. Turning off the heat, I continued speaking.
I felt like we weren't a good match.
What?
So, the moment I met James, I knew I couldn't fall in love with him.
I confessed straightforwardly. At that moment, a brief silence falls. The one to break the silence was Amanda.
You mean like intuition?
I guess so.
Anyway, it wasn't about his looks or personality or anything like that. I just felt James and I weren't suited to be husband and wife.
How luxurious, Amanda said with a groan.
Then you should have given that marriage proposal to me.
I really should have. They both like flashy things, so surely Amanda and James would make a better match. Imagining it made me a little envious.
Oh, William will be here soon, so I need to set out the food. Wow, sounds rough.
After a deflated response, we end the call. Everyday life immediately resumes. James doesn't come back. With no choice, I welcome William alone.
Is James not here?
Seems he's busy with work. I have no choice but to fib. In terms of education and job title, James is an outstanding person. The reality is he pushes work onto his subordinates and doesn't even show up to the office, but William doesn't know that. So even now, he praises the food I made like this.
It's a shame I can't directly thank the person who made this meal. I'll pass along the message.
Suppressing my welling frustration, I reply. William smiles and says to me,
Then please tell them this. Thank you always for taking care of my son, and the food was delicious.
Certainly. Nodding, I secretly clench my fist. Those words should rightfully be directed at me. Later on, it seems Amanda made contact with James. Her first words over the phone were,
Dorothy's husband is handsome, huh? You met James? I mean, from what I heard, he sounds like an awful husband, right? That actually made me curious.
It was an opinion typical of Amanda with her strong curiosity. Dismayed, I still wait for her next words.
His personality didn't seem that bad, but his fake pleasantry smile was definitely suspicious. That was clearly an act. You can tell from a smile?
Hearing that, Amanda's voice took on a proud tone. I can tell.
Well, there are a few other tricks too.
In that manner, Amanda went on a one-sided spiel about her assessment of James, and then the call ended. In the now quiet room, I think to myself, Amanda met James. That was all there was to it. But for some reason, that fact caught in my chest and raised questions. I recall a feeling I had before. That James and Amanda would surely make a good match. No way. Shaking off the bad premonition, I returned to the housework. A housewife doesn't have the luxury to indulge in sentimentality. Even in my doctor days, there were physically demanding aspects, but on top of that, housework includes manual labor too. However, this is something other housewives won't accept even if I tell them.
What? Manual labor is something the husband should do, no?
The neighborhood ladies said with a laugh, and in the first place, many families living in this class of high-rise employ housekeepers. Not being understood is painful too, huh? Once again, my hand wiping the window stops. I notice tears have welled up in my eyes.
What are you doing? Huh?
A voice from behind startles me. Looking at the clock, it was already time for James to come home. Although usually he's too absorbed in his playtime and doesn't return until late at night. Today of all days, he seems to have properly come home on time. Loosening his tie, James says,
Is dinner ready?
Sorry, I forgot. Saying that, I dash to the kitchen. Just as I'm about to open the fridge, James says in a bothered tone,
Never mind. Let's eat out today. Anything you want to eat?
Not really. Then the nearby restaurant is fine. Saying that brusquely, James took me to a high-end restaurant. Normally a reservation would be required, but James is a regular, so they make an exception for him.
This is the restaurant where you proposed to me.
Suddenly feeling nostalgic, I mention it. Is that so? His voice feigning ignorance makes me give a wry smile. Thinking he must be embarrassed, I look at his face. In that instant, disappointment flashed through my mind. James doesn't seem to remember proposing to me. With a surprised look, he says,
Didn't Dad just bring the marriage certificate and it was over once we signed it?
Maybe so. Still crestfallen, I nod. That's not true. I wasn't keen on this marriage. So I had intended to find a chance to confess my true feelings to James. I thought even William would reconsider if he heard from James that he wanted to call off the engagement. However, right before that, James called me out to this restaurant and proposed. I was shocked. It was unexpected and made me happy too. So I accepted this marriage. And yet, James, the key person, has completely forgotten about it.
Come to think of it, I met someone today who said she was your friend.
You mean Amanda?
Yeah, that was her name.
James nodded as if confirming his own memory. She was beautiful. Wasn't she?
Oh, I was surprised. She had a youthfulness that belied being over 30.
James said, sounding impressed. I figured as much. Amanda is single, but it's not like men don't hit on her. Rather the opposite, she's always blessed with new boyfriends. What did you two talk about?
Well, she got mad at me, telling me not to trouble my best friend so much.
James lowered his eyes, looking uncomfortable. That gesture was boyish and somehow charming. However, that wasn't the important part.
Amanda, what have you done? Dorothy?
Though James seemed puzzled, I was too preoccupied to care. I had told Amanda not to tell anyone. Yet she apparently shared my complaints about him to James himself of all people. You don't need to mind what Amanda said. But...
Excuse me, valued customers.
The restaurant staff approached.
We request that you please keep your voices down. Oh, okay.
Taking the opportunity of being warned, we placed our order. The chef's recommended course, it was the restaurant's signature course, with the dishes determined by the ingredients procured that day. I wonder what will come out today.
Who knows?
I excitedly awaited the food. However,
excuse me. Is there a problem?
The staff remained unperturbed, but my face had likely turned somewhat pale. What was brought out was a course meal for one person.
I'm the worst as a husband, huh?
James said as he started eating. I hurriedly denied his words. I didn't say that much. I did grumble a bit, but Amanda's way of speaking involves exaggeration. Don't take it seriously.
So it's true that you complained?
Hanging my head, I reply. Yes.
You can't even satisfactorily handle a single household chore, can you? Today I just happened to forget, that's all.
I always properly make meals and wait for James to come home. However, usually even if the food gets cold, James doesn't return, so I eat alone and warm up James' portion in the microwave for him to eat later. Day after day of that. It certainly lacked fulfillment. So unintentionally, I forgot to make dinner today. To be told I'm habitually neglecting housework as a result is disheartening.
I was wrong to forget to cook and to complain about you to a friend. But I don't recall deserving this treatment. We need to be quiet in this restaurant.
Ignoring my side of the story, James said that. I silently waited for James to finish eating, desperately enduring the rumbling of my empty stomach, lest I let my guard down. On the way home, despite sitting in the passenger seat, James felt so distant. In reality, his feelings had likely long since left me. While driving, James spoke.
You said it was fine to give me to Amanda, didn't you?
That's dash. That's not something I brought up. Amanda had merely said it as a joke. Before I knew it, all of Amanda's words were being twisted in a way unfavorable to me. It couldn't be that Amanda. I shake my head, denying the worst possibility. No way, because Amanda has been my best friend since our student days. She would never betray me. I desperately try to convince myself of that. However, immediately after, James said, "Can we break up?"
What?
I've decided to remarry Amanda, you see. The car stops. A figure swiftly gets into the back seat. My heart leaps. There's no mistake. The one who got in was Amanda. Casually crossing her legs in the seat, she says, "James told you, right? If you get it, then get out of the car."
No way!
Stunned speechless, the two repeatedly told me to get out of the car. Overwhelmed by the pressure, I ended up exiting the vehicle. The car immediately speeds off. Left behind on the dark road, I stand there in a daze for a while. By the time I come to my senses, I had started crying. With a hoarse voice dried out from tears, I call a friend. "Thomas? Due to circumstances, I can't go home. Come pick me up."
What's that about?
My friend Thomas didn't seem to grasp the situation well. Even so, he apparently sensed from my tearful voice that it wasn't an ordinary occurrence.
Got it. I'll come get you right away.
Please. Ending the call, I crouched at the side of the road. Eventually, a single car arrives.
Dorothy.
Thank you, Thomas. By Thomas's car, I was somehow able to return to my parents' home. During the ride, Thomas didn't ask me about the circumstances. My parents were shocked to see me with eyes swollen from crying.
Dorothy, what on earth happened?
Actually, I began to explain the situation bit by bit. When she finished, Dad stood up, furious.
I'm going to James' parents right now to settle this. Calm down.
Thomas, the only one keeping his composure, tried to soothe Dad. Thomas was a lawyer. He likely judged that acting rashly would put me at a disadvantage.
Can you let me handle this?
Thomas, thank you. I'm counting on you, I replied, wiping away her tears. Just 3 days later, divorce papers arrived from James.
What a jerk!
Dad was angry, but James didn't marry me because he loved me in the first place. Rather than continuing a sham marriage, maybe it was better to separate, I thought. But what worried me was my best friend, Amanda. Amanda seemed intent on kicking me out and becoming James' new wife herself. In other words, the words I thought were a joke were Amanda's true feelings.
Amanda, you betrayed me.
She must have been enamored with the wealthy James over our long friendship. If that's the case, there's nothing I can do about it.
Thomas, I'm leaving this matter to you.
Got it. Together with Thomas, I headed to James' high-rise apartment. The place was overflowing with Amanda's belongings. Amanda sat on the sofa, buried in designer handbags.
Well, look who's here. I have something to discuss too. Oh, really?
Amanda feigned surprise. James stood against the wall, glaring at Thomas. He had disliked the elite Thomas for a while now. James likely felt inferior, knowing he only succeeded thanks to his family status. James barked like a cowering small dog.
So since I dumped you, you're moving on to that guy. This is business.
Thomas replied calmly.
I'm here today as a lawyer for your wife.
Those words, how reassuring they were to me. The term wife reflected Tom's character of clearly separating public and private matters.
If you have a lawyer, it'll be quick, right?
Amanda opened her mouth mockingly.
You want compensation money from the divorce trial, don't you? That's not it.
No need to hold back. Here. Saying that, she carelessly took something out and threw it at me. I will take the heir, the young master. Here's $10,000 in settlement money. It hit my foot, making a faint sound. It was a bundle of bills. Seeing me stunned, Amanda burst out laughing. To the triumphant Amanda, an unexpected voice came flying.
The heir is Dorothy.
Huh? A dumbfounded moment passed. Thomas started laughing as loudly as Amanda. I looked at James. He too had a look of disbelief on his face.
That's ridiculous. I'm Dad's son.
That's right. Tom nodded once, then continued his explanation.
However, this is the decision of the conglomerate's chairman, your father. Don't talk nonsense. Why would Dad?
Even as he retorted, James' face gradually turned pale. He must be thinking, it can't be. Amanda also seemed shaken by Tom's words. To the two of them, Tom said in a businesslike tone.
The chairman knew everything. What did you say?
James finally started trembling violently. It's no wonder. Looking back on his deeds up until now, they were all things that would tarnish the conglomerate's prestige. Even James must know that. And if William had grasped all those actions.
The chairman said he had been waiting for the day James would have a change of heart. But with this incident, the chairman judged that a change of heart was hopeless. Wait. I'll talk to Dad right now.
Compared to Tom's clear voice, James' voice was pathetic.
At the same time, the chairman highly valued Dorothy's dedication thus far and appointed her as the guardian of his grandchild. Grandchild? Dad doesn't have a...
James stopped mid-sentence, seeming to understand. James looked at me with a surprised face. I nodded.
William's successor isn't you. It's your child inside my belly. You never said a word about having a child,
said James, flustered.
I was going to tell you soon. I never thought I'd end up telling you like this, though.
Even as I answered, there was a sense of emptiness. James and I are already over as husband and wife. Maybe we were over from the start. In any case, I felt sorry for the child that would be born between such parents.
You said you didn't see Dorothy as a woman.
Amanda, enraged, yelled at James. Still looking bewildered, James said in a hurry,
I have an obligation to leave an heir. What will you do if that heir takes your position? I never even thought about it.
The two exploded in anger at each other. I said, exasperated,
Until this child comes of age, I will be the organization's representative. In other words, Dorothy is essentially the successor.
Tom added cleverly. James, his face pale, asked tremblingly,
So what happens to me now? Naturally, you'll have to step down from your current position. That seat belongs to Dorothy.
Saying that, Tom took out some documents from his briefcase and showed them. They all had the chairman's signature.
Oh no!
James, upon receiving and checking the documents, collapsed on the spot. The documents slipped from James' hands and fluttered in the air. Someone swiftly grabbed them. It was Amanda.
If we tear this up, it'll be meaningless,
she said, tearing the documents in anger. Yet Thomas remained unfazed.
Those documents are copies. What? The real documents are with the chairman. Now, go to the chairman and try tearing up all the documents.
Clear provocation and contempt were contained in those words. Amanda screamed.
There's no way we can do that. Just give up,
Amanda said firmly.
It's all been decided,
Thomas stated with finality. Thomas turned on his heel. And I followed suit, starting to walk away. From behind, I heard James' weak, pleading voice.
Wait. Let's call off the divorce. That child needs a father. Right?
Maybe if you were a normal dad. I didn't even bother turning around anymore. With my back still turned, I said,
But you? You'll only be a bad example for this child. But you? You'll only be a bad example for this child. Dorothy, don't say that. I'm the kids.
He was probably trying to assert that he was the dad. Interrupting his voice, I declared,
This child has no dad. Don't be ridiculous.
His weak voice suddenly turned angry.
If it's not my kid, then they can't be the successor, right? That's right. That's why William made his decision. James got into a car accident and is gone now. At least, that's what we'll announce to the public. What the hell is that?
Weakness and confusion returned to James' voice. Yes. That's how it should be, James.
If we reveal the truth as is, it will tarnish the prestige of the conglomerate. That's why the chairman is using the accident as a pretext to exile you and entrust everything to his grandchild. But this man is still alive,
Amanda said desperately. With my hand on the doorknob, I replied,
Why don't you turn on the TV? The news about James being in an accident should be on by now. No way!
The boldness vanished from Amanda's usually assertive voice. Thomas and I left the room. Walking side by side down the hallway, I asked,
What's going to happen to James now? Who knows? Maybe he'll be given a new identity and have to start over from scratch.
Thomas's tone had returned to its usual casual manner. His job was done. Now, my job was waiting for me. Many media outlets had jumped on the story of a former doctor who had lost her husband in an accident and would now live as the guardian of his child. After all, there was already a high level of social interest in me to begin with. An unknown doctor catches the eye of the chairman of a conglomerate and becomes his son's wife. That alone was already impactful enough.
How do you feel right now? Me? Not much. I just feel sorry for my son.
I conveyed my true feelings to the reporters, pointing their microphones at me. In my arms was the newborn figure of my son, Brian.
This child doesn't like the sound of camera shutters. Sorry about that.
Brian was now an important figure who single-handedly carried the future of the conglomerate on his shoulders. I couldn't afford to draw his ire. I made my way through the waves of reporters surrounding my home. I got into the company car and headed to work.
Excuse me.
The car stopped midway and a woman got in. It was Deborah, the babysitter who would take care of Brian in my place. Thanks for your help again today.
Of course.
Nodding, Deborah held Brian close. Brian let out a happy laugh. A smile also appeared on Deborah's face.
I can't believe he's become so attached to me.
Your sincerity got through to him. When I said that, Deborah smiled. With someone like her, I can entrust my son with peace of mind. The car started moving again. My new workplace is the space James used to dominate. However, his subordinates had the worst impression of him. When I arrived at the office, one of the subordinates who had just come to work spoke to me.
Good morning, Dorothy.
Good morning. I returned the greeting in the same manner. We walked together, chatting casually.
I'm so glad you're here, Dorothy,
the subordinate said with a deep sense of relief. I gave a wry smile. Oh, you're exaggerating.
No, James just dumped all the work on us and did nothing himself. To be honest, he was a nuisance.
The subordinate's true feelings. I felt a chill in my heart. I'll work hard so I don't get the same evaluation.
Yes.
The subordinate's face, nodding in agreement, was filled with expectation and trust. For now, I'm adored by my subordinates. But it's not because I'm capable. It's simply a psychological response of expecting the next boss to be better because the previous one was so bad. I need to stay on my toes. Muttering to myself, I started my desk work. Because James had been slacking off, work was greatly stagnant. Just getting through it required a lot of time and effort. I went to see Brian after work. I could have had him wait at home, but I wanted to see Brian during my break, so I had Brian and Deborah wait in a separate room. Also, at home, we would be surrounded by reporters. Having them accompany me was also about protecting them.
Dorothy.
Where's Brian? When I asked Deborah, who had approached me, she showed me Brian in her arms. Brian was sleeping peacefully. He's sleeping so well.
He's such a good boy.
Is that so? I couldn't help thinking that it was good he didn't resemble James. Brian's features definitely had traces of James. Maybe his personality will end up being similar too. I had a moment of such anxiety. I wonder who Brian takes after. Sleeping so peacefully like this.
It's definitely you, Dorothy.
You think so? A heartwarming moment passed. It was when I left the office and headed for my ride. Dorothy. Suddenly, a man in dirty clothes leaped out from the shadows. His appearance had changed drastically, but I recognized his voice. It was James.
Stay back. Okay.
Deborah was terrified. I stood between her and Brian, guarding them from James.
What's this all of a sudden?
You ruined my whole life. The conversation was completely disjointed. James continued to rant.
You took my place. If it weren't for you, give me back my place.
James was growling like a stray dog. I replied calmly. I didn't take it. It was taken from you because you didn't fulfill your responsibilities.
Shut up. I bet you whispered in Dad's ear and had him kick me out.
James, consumed by suspicion, couldn't be reached with words. Deborah asked timidly.
That man, could he be? That's right.
A man who is already considered long gone by society. That's James. However, James himself is still alive, abandoned without any help, all alone.
I shouldn't have bothered with you in the first place.
Another figure appeared. It was Amanda, also in a disheveled state. Amanda pointed at James and shouted,
I only gave you a chance because you said you were a rich boy, but now you've fallen to being just a jobless bum. Then get away from me. Having you around is just a nuisance when you can't even cook.
He retorted back at Amanda, not backing down. Amanda's face contorted even more with anger.
What are you saying? I can't get a job because your father leaked my information to corporate executives. Take responsibility. That's because you got greedy beyond your status.
The two endlessly complained about each other. Truly, weren't they a perfect match no matter what?
They're suspicious people. Someone call the police.
I grabbed Deborah's hand and started running. Right now, the two of them were absorbed in each other in a sense. It was now or never to escape.
Hey, Dorothy! Don't you run away, you coward.
I felt the two of them chasing after us. Hearing the commotion from inside the office, male employees and security guards came rushing out. Before long, the two were restrained by the sturdy security guards. James shouted in frustration.
I didn't do anything. So why am I going through this?
Doing nothing is your problem. I said that, as if spitting it out. James and Amanda were taken away by the police as dangerous individuals. From then on, they were forbidden from approaching me and Brian.
Forbidden from approaching my own wife and child? That's ridiculous.
He apparently made that claim, but of course, James was no longer my husband or anything. The more he spoke, the more he creeped out those around him, they say. Amanda also couldn't get a job because William pulled some strings behind the scenes, so she reluctantly stuck with James.
She's the woman who stole James from me and Dad from Brian. I can't forgive her.
William said that, quietly angry.
They're both jobless and struggling to even eat. They don't have any savings from fooling around.
So somehow, they showed up seeking financial assistance or something from me. Despite that, they didn't even apologize to me or anything. Half a year passed since James and Amanda's intrusion. During that time, Deborah returned to her parents' home from the shock, and I ended up taking care of Brian. It was really tough. I'd go see him during breaks and after work to breastfeed him. Just that made me feel like a mom, but the reality wasn't like that at all.
You're crying again. What's wrong? Are you hungry? Or is something wrong with your diaper?
Even when I talked to him, there was no response. He was still a baby who couldn't speak yet. I picked up the sobbing Brian and gently called his name.
Don't cry, Brian.
I wonder if those words got through to him. Brian looked up at me with teary eyes. I'm sorry, Brian, that you don't have a dad. But I'll work hard for both of us. I said that with a prayer. The words still didn't seem to get through. He probably just happened to stop crying by coincidence.
Deborah will take care of you again starting tomorrow.
I got a call from Deborah. She said she recovered from the shock and will return to her babysitting job. Brian is more attached to Deborah, if anything. She spends more time with him and has been handling this difficult childcare. I'm grateful, not jealous at all. But
I'll become a mom you can be proud of.
From now on, I won't just leave it all to Deborah, I'll study childcare too. And so, let's live together, the two of us, with my one and only irreplaceable family.